Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to you wherever you are in the world. I hope that this week has been wonderful for you as I stumble over my words. Right here today, despite my best intentions, I have left recording the video until the last moment. So it's actually 10 a.m. Sunday morning here in Perth, West Australia, which is where I am. Now, I hope that the week has been kind to you. Um, and the weather is kind too. Just a little bit of a tip here. Today, I'm going to be more focused on the palmistry than anything else. And this is because I introduced the subject last week. Before I get into the content, though, just a reminder everybody, you are invited to put your own feedback up and your own comments. I mean, I think palmistry is um, very debatable, okay, because you've got so many different ways of approaching the subject, so many different types of reading hands and all the rest of it. So the content that I'm putting up is basically just one aspect of it, and you may have different thoughts. And the other thing is too that certainly where I've found that when I look at my own hand and I do comparisons, it doesn't always actually ring true with the book. So anyway, your feedback will be really well. It could be quite fun if you feel so inspired as to give a comment or two. So you are invited. Please do feel free to leave your feedback, leave questions, even leave, it just sounds like rubbish. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to you wherever you are in the world. I hope that this week has been wonderful for you as I stumble over my words. Right here today, despite my best intentions, I have left recording the video until the last moment. So it's actually 10 a.m. Sunday morning here in Perth, West Australia, which is where I am. Now, I hope that the week has been kind to you. Um, and the weather is kind too. Just a little bit of a tip here. Today, I'm going to be more focused on the palmistry than anything else. And this is because I introduced the subject last week. Before I get into the content, though, just a reminder. So, just a little bit of chitter chatter here. I don't actually have a lot to talk to you about as far as what's going on with me and my life. Suffice to say that it's spring. The weather. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, which is okay because the gardens need it and that kind of thing. But my focus has been on getting the house and the garden in order, probably now for about 2 weeks. And to compound my struggles, and I think you may have some laughter at this. I hope you might even have a suggestion to resolve this little problem for me. My little boy baby, and I should get a photo of him up. When I talk about my boy baby, he's my little puppy dog that I got earlier this year. So he's in his first year of life. Now, I had forgotten it's quite hard work to have a puppy. They are like having a 2-year-old toddler. They just seem to find trouble. And he's coming into new stages of his life because he's adventurous. He's just so cute. But you might have suggestions for how I might manage some of his behaviour because at the moment, what I find is I'm doing positive parenting Googling on how to look after a puppy. We don't tend to use dog cages in Australia, but I am considering getting a dog cage. But considerations I've got to take into account include the fact that actually he does chew. I mean, he's got a permanent smile on his face because he must have a deformity. The mouth doesn't actually close, so his teeth are on display. But he does actually chew a lot of things, and I inadvertently taught him how to dig this week, which means that I've got to keep an eye on him all the time because otherwise he goes out there and digs. And I can imagine you're all going like, you taught the dog how to dig. Well, I did. I was weeding the garden and I was trying to actually get to, because I've obviously let the retic go and that kind of stuff, get to the sprinkler heads. And the little puppy, of course, he was watching me. He was entranced as I was digging around these things. And from what I've now seen is if I turn my back on him, he goes out there and he tries to dig a hole. So I've created a monster. He doesn't get far, but I have created a bit of a monster there. But without any further ado, let me stop waffling and let's get into the actual content for today because I have a feeling, well, I know it's going to be a long one, okay? I possibly could have done a whole different channel about, well, if not a channel, perhaps I should have put all the content about palm reading onto a separate video series or something. But anyway, cracking on. So last week I alluded to the fact that I was drawn to or guided to, depending on your line of thought, a book that I have on my bookshelf. I've had it for a long time and I haven't looked at it for quite a while. Anyway, backstory on this is I used to go to secondhand shops back in the day, close my eyes and allow myself to be drawn to a book. Anyway, for the purposes of this particular yarning video, last week I picked the book up following that process, and I thought it might be something interesting, hopefully a little bit of fun for you. It's a book that's called Sexual Palmistry, and it's written by Nathaniel Altman, and it was published back in 1986. Now, of course, I can't confirm or deny the veracity of his findings in this book, but I thought it would be a bit of fun for us. Anyway, it certainly makes a person question, or me question, the value of the palm readings that we see online from a photograph, because whether or not we're talking about a character analysis of the palms, we're talking about more than the lines on the palm. And even the digits. There's far more to it than this, and you'll understand this as we go through this video. And as usual, I have put chapter timings in so that you can come back and forth and check things out, because I would encourage you to take a look at your own hands, your own fingers, and this kind of stuff, and see what it means to you as you go through, and put your comments up. If you feel that some of the suggestions from this book, because obviously I'm not the author, resonate or they don't, because I can say when I look at my palms and compare them to the book information that, there's a bit of a question mark about some of them. But anyway, look, I've put this image up here saying hands, wrists, and fingers. Today, we're not really going to go into the detail of a lot of the, well, certainly we're not going to be talking about lines on the hands. We're going to focus, because otherwise the video will be too long, on the actual hands, the hand shapes, what that means in the shape of the fingers, without looking at the lines. Now, as you can see by these images, the reason why I'm going to break it down over a couple of yarning videos is because palmistry can be extremely complex. You can look at palmistry from a superficial perspective, which I have done in the past. It's kind of yeah, for me, the way I use it is just really at a glance, and it's not something I've got into in depth with any of my clients. And this is because there's a lot to it. There's a lot to remember. These two images here show you just how involved and detailed it is. If you look at the image of the hand, which obviously is taken from probably a photocopy or whatever, you can see that each hand is broken down. You've got astrological elements. You've got obviously the lines are there as well. And you also have the mounds, which is that fleshy part underneath the thumb. All of these things have different meanings, and there's a lot to know and to consider when doing a character analysis based on numerology. So I would invite you to listen to the content, take a look at your hand, press pause, take a look at your hand and see what relates to you, because this is all part of developing self-awareness as well, even if it doesn't resonate. But I do encourage you to actually put your comments up saying certain things, as I've noticed with my own hands and my own fingers, that some of the content that is there that I'm seeing doesn't seem to fit. But then when I look at other aspects more holistically, then I can see that it does have a certain resonance or truth to it. What I do know, because, I'm very, I hope, transparent about the fact that palmistry is not my area of expertise. It's not something I've really thrown myself into, but I have looked at it from a superficial level in the past. And what I'm aware of, and I'm not sure that all the palm readers will promote this, is that when we are looking at doing palm reading, whether it's on ourselves or on others, and I think it's a good place to start by looking at your own hands, is that you have to look at both of them. Okay, so my understanding is that the hands change over the life path as far as the lines go. Some become deeper, some become finer. So the hands will reflect changes, is where I'm going. And if you're able to look at both of your hands, you're able to see past, I guess, and then present. And by that, I mean that there are some things, because you've got lines on the palms, and some of them are referred to as lifelines and that kind of stuff. Some people will have a short lifeline and they might get into a panic and look at it and go, oh my God, I'm going to die young or whatever. But actually, that may not be a reality at all, because there's other, obviously you've got free will too. You can live your life in a way that promotes longevity, shall we say. And this, let me go on to the next slide. Well, the reason I had to come onto this slide is because we have two hands. Most of us have got two hands. I don't know what you do for people if they don't have two hands. But either way, for those of us with two hands, we have what is called a dominant hand. And so when we talk about short lifelines and this kind of stuff, that might be something that is on our non-dominant hand. We can actually see that. But when we have a dominant hand, this is the hand that we write with. It's the hand that we tend to work with, and that may actually have a much longer one. So we might have been born with the potential in the non-dominant hand of having a short lifespan or whatever, but then as we live our life, we get more opportunity. Now, I have to say the dominant hand is the favoured hand. It's your preferred hand. If you're ambidextrous, you're going to probably need to read both of them and make a carryover. But the other thing to be aware of as well when looking at both of these hands is you do get variations somewhat in the hand shape. But more importantly, as we live our lives, the dominant hand tends to have those lines. If you look at the palm on the right hand image, you see that those lines of the hand are actually more deeper, more deeper. If English is my first language, I think sometimes I struggle with it. But certainly they are deeper than and more obvious than the image, if I can speak, the hand that is their right hand. So this person in that right hand image, they must be a left-hander as a dominant hand. Now, you will probably notice when you look at both of your hands that you're going to have similar, especially if you have got a dominant right or left hand. You're going to see that that working hand is going to have those lines etched far more obviously into your palm. And interestingly, I thought I'll put this image in on the left as well, because there you're looking not just, well, the lines aren't very clear, but you can certainly see the finger shapes and styles. You can see the thumbs. And they look fairly much the same, but there is difference anyway. And this is not the best photo for the purposes of palm reading, but what you actually see there, and I think it's very hard to tell which one is the dominant and which one isn't in the left-hand image, but you actually see that that forearm on the right-hand side of the image is hairier than the one on the left-hand side. If you look up at the fingers, this is a relaxed state in the thumb. You can see that the right hand has got a bigger gap between the index and the pointer, Mr. Pointy, and the middleman. And you also have a greater expansion between Mr. Pointy and, I wish you could see my cursor moving because I'm moving it for myself. I'm not that technologically advanced. But either way, you can see that there is a larger gap between the pointy finger and the thumb, a bigger angle, shall we say. We're probably looking more at 45 degrees there. Maybe, actually, you know what? Maybe about 50 degrees, whereas the hand on the other side between the thumb and the pointy finger, you're looking at about 45 degrees there. So there is some variation between the hands, is the point I'm trying to make. So, if you were getting a palm reading face to face from a palm reader, what's going to vary between them and a photograph is that a photograph doesn't show things such as softness, suppleness, flexibility, including flexibility of the fingers, and even firmness. And I'm referring here to the firmness of the mounds that you have on your palms as well. And you will be able to tell yourself when you touch different parts of your hands and go through the exercises and activities that I've got coming up, that there's a variation between your dominant and non-dominant hand. I should say left and right. I might just say left and right and hope you understand it. If there's more information that you want about this, if I'm not clear, I do encourage you just to ask a question, because I'm happy to pull my books out and answer them. I do have other books I can refer to. So, the first thing a palm reader is going to look at when they hold your palm in their hands, or even if they're looking at a photograph, is the shape of your hand. Now, I took this image. I've had to put the reference up there from a research project. I'm not sure what the research was about because I wasn't really interested. I actually just wanted the photographs, and I wanted specific hand shapes that would relate to the images that I've got in the book here, because I'm not that artistic apparently. Anyway, I did observe in this process of trying to find images that there's many online sites that refer to palmistry and how to read them, and they will state that there's either 4, 5, or 7 specific hand shapes. And frankly, I think that the different hand shapes and the number is kind of put to rest here, because we've got, what have we got here? 15 different hand shapes that we can have. But there is a big but with that. I do understand why these people will be looking at 4, 5, or 7. For the most part, what I've seen is when they're talking about 4 specific hand shapes, they're generally, because we all operate from our space of knowledge and our comfort zone, especially when we're doing intuitive type work. And so for these people, they obviously understand the elements. Okay. So if they're saying there's 4 specific hand shapes, they're looking at things like whether a person's an air sign, earth, water. What's the other one? Water, earth, fire. Okay. So they associate hand shapes with the elements. The other people that look at the 5, they will be looking at the 5 hand shapes that I'm going to talk about today. And one of the things I should mention is that one of the hand shapes that's referred to is called the psychic hand. I think that's debatable myself, or disputable, because I think that's a little narrow as a descriptor goes. Probably if I was into the earth elements or reading palms with elements, I might associate that one with water because it's more emotional. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a little while. I just thought for now I'd briefly touch on the hand shapes and draw it to your attention. So, a common theme when it comes to hands across all of the palmists, from what I know, is what is called the square hand. And you can see with a square hand that the palm, the shape of the palm is quite squarish. It's a bit box like. The fingers are proportionate to the length of the palm. So, it's kind of like the whole hand has a squarish aspect to it. And I would say many of these ones that the readers that focus on the elements would probably call this an earth-based hand, okay, associated with the astro elements of the earth. This is because this particular hand shape is said to have a preference for order. They're common sense. They prefer reason and logic over emotions, and they can be very practical. And as this book relates to, I think you know the word that I don't want to say. I'll call it romance or intimate partnership. What it basically says is that this type of person asks the practical questions when they are introduced to a new romantic potential. They're more interested in things like, if it was a guy and he was thinking about getting involved with a woman, he'd be asking himself things like, but can she cook and can she clean? And potentially even in what she like between the sheets, really. A girl might be asking the questions of, well, is he a good provider? Is he a protector? Is he financially secure? Is he in reliable employment? That doesn't mean to say that they can't be emotional, but their decisions are going to be influenced by practical elements and components, and they tend to be reliable, stable, and dependable. So you could take a look at your hand now if you want and ask yourself, do I have a square hand? You know what? Maybe the square hand is not the earth based hand, because I had actually forgotten about this. I prepared all of my notes well before I was doing the recording today. I had forgotten about the spatulate hand. Okay. The spatulate hand obviously is very earthy here as well. I remember when I first heard about it that I associated it with things like the earth elementals. And this is because while I don't have a good image of the hand, the spatulate hand does have a squarish aspect to it. Um, and the fingers, you see, this is the bit that defines it. The fingers remind me a little bit of frog toes, which is why I've got the images of the frogs up. You might want to zoom in and take a look at this. Um, Underneath the fingernail, those little pads under the fingernails, there tends to be a roundness to them, which is not shown in this particular image. Maybe a little bit more so. It might be more obvious in this image I've got up called M3. But either way, if you can try and visualize, they definitely, that top digit, and I have seen this, by the way, is a little rounded, okay? The fingernails are also a bit rounded or triangular at the same time, if that makes sense. It's like they fan out from the cuticles towards the top. So that's these are the indicators of what's called the spatulate hand. Now, people with the spatulate hand, they tend to be very realistic. They're quite strong and broad in their appearance, according to the author. And where I call the fingers splaying out, the author says the fingers can be a little bit knotty or gnarly, and it's the fanning of the fingertips that is why the hand is referred to as a spatula. But I've got to say that in my experience of looking at images, it's not just the fact that those fingernails fan out, but also that little bulbous part like the frog toes. Anyway, what he says is they tend to be very energetic, tenacious, they're confident, they know how to take advantage of the opportunities that present to them, and that while they're practical in much the same way as those people with a square hand, they also have a love of adventure. So they can be impulsive, they can be charming, and they can also be infuriating because they are actually apparently rampant flirts, usually very highly sensual. So that doesn't mean, by the way, that they can't commit and pursue responsibilities. Um, because one thing that I did see in there, and sorry about me kissing and pursing my lips and that kind of stuff, what I did see is that while they can be these rampant flirts, they can be in a monogamous relationship, but they still enjoy being the center of attention, I guess, and the flirtations. Even if they don't act on the flirtations, they enjoy that aspect of life. Something worth knowing, I think, just a little bit of interest, point of interest, maybe. I don't know. You let me know. So the conic hand, or it's referred to as conic or conic, however you like to pronounce it, they also, because palms do tend to have squarish aspects to them, right? So it does tend to be square across the back of the hand, if you like, but it tends to taper going towards the wrist. This photo obviously is not the best, which is why I've put these red lines on it. Um, in truth, the conic hand would have the thumb when the hand's in a relaxed state, the thumb would be leaning out towards, say, a 45-degree angle there. But what would identify the conic hand is that all of the fingers on the hand have this narrower at the tip and broader at the base of the finger. And this is why I've put the red lines there as well. Another factor to the conic hand is that the skin texture is very soft. They're considered to be more romantic and sentimental than people with square hands, and there can be some mood mobility for people with conic hands where they alternate. And by this, I guess it's more extreme than just, oh, I'm having a happy moment, I'm having a sad moment. They tend to, according to the book, alternate between the peaks of exaltation and the depths of despair. And at the same time, they can be intensely devoted to a partner one day, and the next day they can be moving on to a new one. If there is a firmness or hardness to the hand, then they're more likely to be able to commit to a relationship and put in the effort to make it endure. So just because a person's got a conic hand does not mean that they will have um, an inability to commit to a healthy relationship, I guess. Either way, people that have got conic hands are associated with creativity and potentially drawn to the arts, especially if they've got well-formed lines on their hand. If the hand is bland and fat, then the person is highly sensuous and they may have tendencies to overindulge in physical behaviours and have a craving for physical affection. And if their emotional needs aren't satisfied, then they may actually shift over to overeating or over-imbibing or whatever to try and fill that void, if you like. Try as I might, I have no doubt that this video is going to be a long one, so I apologise for that. Just remember, you can always go to pause and you can always come back and pick up and watch the chapters that you haven't already watched, okay? So the hand shape that we're talking about that's called psychic or intuitive is a hand that is supposedly very rare in that it's got long and graceful fingers, it's got pointy tips to it, and as with the conic hand, the owners of these psychic hands are romantic and impressionable and emotional, but to a far greater extent. They tend to be motivated by their deepest feelings, which means that they can often lack reason and common sense, and they're highly and painfully idealistic, and can even be a little bit naive within their relationships. So, in some ways, they can be quite out of touch with reality and their practical day to day work, and they need to, if they were entering into a romantic partnership, they would need to attract somebody who's strong and steady and sensitive, who can help them to ground themselves and bring stability to their lives. Now, I want to be clear here. I don't like calling this hand the psychic hand, because it infers that I certainly know back when I was first introduced to palmistry and getting into all of this stuff myself, that I would look at things and think, oh, well, a psychic must have a psychic hand. That's not the case, okay? You can be psychic and have a different hand shape. This is just called a psychic hand. I think they probably should call it a very emotional hand, actually. So let's be very real and practical about this. Very few hands are going to conform to all of the requirements for a specific hand shape. Usually, a person's hand will be mixed, right? And this is what we've got here in this image. If it's mixed, the person's going to lean toward a specific type of hand shape. That hand shape may contain, say, two or more aspects of the hand shapes that we've talked about before. So, it might be that a couple of the fingers have got spatulate fingers, or it might be that the hand is square shaped, but it's got conic fingernails, things like that. So, that would mean that it's a mixed hand. But you can have hands that have got lots and lots of aspects of all the different hand shapes. It might be that one finger's conic and the other one is squarish. You know what I mean? But we'll talk about the fingers perhaps next week, or we might go into the lines. Probably we'll talk about the fingers first, and I'll worry about that later. I'll get back into here. The other thing that comes in, because we've basically got these mixed hand shapes, if we're going to be setting the foundations for a very careful character analysis of the hand, then it's not just the fingers, the mounts, and the lines that are modifiers. We have to look at the consistency of the hand, the size of the hands, the skin texture, and how flexible it is. All of this stuff provides more information to a palm reader, especially if they're doing a psychosexual character analysis to get insight into the person, shall we say. So let's take a look at some of these modifiers. So, when we talk about the hand consistency, we're talking about how well the hands respond under pressure, and we're checking to see if they're soft or hard. So, what you could do is grab your friend's hand and gently squeeze them in yours. And when you do this, the flesh of a flabby hand will easily crush. You don't have to squeeze really hard, by the way. And people with thin, flabby hands are said to have a low libido, with difficulty expressing their emotions. Now, flabby hands are an indication of a person who is idle, a sensitive dreamer type person. So I'm just going into here what the different types of consistency of a hand are and what they reflect, okay? So going back to it, flabby hands are an indication of a person that is idle, okay? They're not really into physical and emotion exertion. So I'm not saying idle in a bad way. I'm just saying that they have a preference for the dreamer. They're a sensitive type person who can lose themselves, I guess, in their daydreams, and they're not into really doing the physical exertion. Now, if these hands are flabby and thick, then the person is more likely to be more sensual, but they will also have an increased appetite for overindulgence, possibly food or alcohol. They may even have a really high libido. And if this, so let me just clarify here, look at my notes again. If it is thick and flabby, and it has a small thumb, or the small thumb bends back easily, then it's said to have a little bit of a lack of willpower attached to it. I'm trying to be polite here. Not everything we see in hands is stuff that we sort of feel comfortable with, when we're doing our own character analyses. But the point being that when we look at these things, we can become aware of them. And if we don't like what we see, then we have opportunity to change things, okay? Now, another form of hand consistency is the soft hands that show a lack of a bony feeling when the hand has pressure applied to it. This can reveal a low libido, but it offers more potential than a flabby hand, okay? If the hand is soft and thick, and we might call this one pudgy, then there is an accentuation of their sensuousness, and they will quite commonly overindulge. And by overindulging, I mean in all things, okay? Elastic hands, that's another consistency, okay? They're not going to crush easily when you grasp them. They tend to spring back. You give it a squeeze, they tend to spring back, and they reveal a vitality and an adaptability along with the capacity to respond well to new ideas and unusual situations. Um, Firm hands, this is a different form of consistency. They have a slight elasticity to them, but they will yield under pressure. Now, generally, firm hand will indicate a person who is physically and psychologically active. They tend to be very stable and quite potent in regard to their libido. I'll let you work that one out. And of course, this is according to the author. Now, at the same time, while they've got this potent libido and these positive traits, they may struggle to adapt to new and unexpected situations, but they still have capacity to change. All right. I guess if we had a problem hand, it would be called the hard hand. Hard hands don't yield under pressure. They have a coarse texture, and I just want to say, reminder, this is the author's viewpoint. They have a coarse texture to them with little elasticity at all. And they're usually men. They have lots of physical strength. They have an abundant and vital libido, but they can be very psychologically rigid and set in their ways. And they will often struggle to have a successful relationship because they tend to block and repress the demonstration of emotions and affection. And this can result, obviously, when we repress our emotions, in outbursts of temper. The author says, especially if the hands and nails are reddish in colour. So, of course, there's the factors of consistency that impact on a character analysis when we look at the palms. Hand flexibility is the next thing. And when we're talking about hand flexibility, apparently the person who can bend their hand to 90 degrees, like we see in this image, they are said to have a very flexible hand. I would be inclined to agree. Um, Anyway, the author states that people with this level of hand flexibility are very impressionable within relationships and they are easy to be controlled or to manipulate. Be aware of that. Be mindful of that if this is your kind of hand. At the same time, the author says owners of very flexible hands can struggle to commit to one specific partner and they can be unpredictable. If the thumb is also extremely flexible, then this indicates that a person is overly generous and can be easily exploited financially by people with a greater willpower and more self-control than what they've got. You know, on the other hand, literally, a moderately flexible hand is one that bends at a more graceful type arc, perhaps at about 45 degrees. So when we look at this hand shape here, that's actually bending at 90 degrees. So the less flexible hand, moderately flexible, will be bending at about 45 degrees. Now, people with that type of flexibility are said to be quite versatile mentally and emotionally, and they are far more reliable people than those with the extremely flexible hand, as I stumble over my words. They tend to be more emotionally open with their partners, and in this flexibility of 45 degrees indicates a person who is willing to give generously to their loved ones, their intimate partner. There may still be an issue with commitment with the moderately flexible hand, but the author does state that while they can commit, they potentially run the risk of being that example of being torn between two lovers. They can love more than one person at a time as far as romance goes. Now, just a word here as well. Being torn between two lovers doesn't mean being unfaithful, okay? So they can still have a monogamous relationship with a person if monogamous is something that's important to you, but they can still hold a love for another person as well. And that doesn't have to be an emotional betrayal either. Sometimes we will have this as we mature and get older. There may still be a love for a previous partner who may have passed away or whatever. And then at the same time, there's no disloyalty. Oh, look, I don't know. I don't know how to explain. I'll leave that for you guys to think about. But yes, it is possible to hold a deep love for more than one person and be faithful and loyal at the same time. On the other hand, a firm hand, so let's go literally along with that. A firm hand is one that hardly bends at all. And the author says this type of person reflects a healthy amount of vital force and energy, and the owners tend to be very careful and selective with their stronger feelings. What this means is they may withhold emotionally until they feel that the recipient of their affection is worthy of their affection, and that they are safe to actually exhibit what they truly feel. They are rarely impulsive, and they will need to come to time, if I can speak, they will need time to adjust to changes. People with a stiff hand, their hand will barely flex at all. And trying to move the hands, the author says, can be quite difficult because the hands are so rigid. And you may actually see hands like this, I've seen them, where when the hands are relaxed and in their natural state, the fingers are actually going to turn inwards. Now, the author says these types of people are quite stubborn and inflexible in their attitudes and their approach to life. They're not open to the opinion of other people, and they are usually quite closed off to new ideas. They still have potential, though, for strong and committed relationships, but it's likely that they will have difficulty sharing their feelings and emotions, at least their more sensitive ones. They will find the expression of anger easier for them. The positive aspect of the rigid hand is that these people are very reliable, they're very responsible, and they are excellent at keeping secrets if you've got secrets that need to be kept. So, hand size is important and it can be quite revealing. The author makes a reference to how people, certainly within the Western world, will associate the size of a hand with the size of a person's genitalia and states that this is a myth. I also would say it's a myth, but I'm going to leave that subject alone. Suffice to say, the correlations for hand size and self awareness within the context of palmistry is that those people with small hands tend to be big thinkers, but this applies when the size of the hands are small within the context of the person's build, their size, their general weight, bone structure, and so forth. So, if the hand is small within the context of the person's body, it reveals a personality or character that views life on this grand scale. They're big picture people, and they tend to be intuitive, often spontaneous, and not particularly interested in the finer details of life. I would equate this type of person as being a visionary. They're the leaders. I've got this grand idea and I know it can be done. And I believe this is what we need to do. These are the steps. But you know what? I'm going to hand this idea to you and you can make it happen because these other people will pay attention to the detail. They will fine stream the vision, if you like, to bring it to fruition. Okay, so the people with the small hands are not necessarily logical or rational. Because they tend to be more emotional and impulsive. Now, on the other hand, literally, those people that have got large hands within the context of their body, they tend to gravitate in the opposite direction. They are analytical, they focus on the fine detail. When it comes to relationships, they're less dramatic, they're more laid back, and they have a preference for things that are evidence based as opposed to focusing on intuitive hunches. I'm sure we've all met them. So, other considerations, according to the author, include skin texture. Now, once again, obviously, it's problematic getting images. So, what I've done, I'm hoping I'm not going to get into trouble with copyright by putting up these images and where I've sourced them from. But you've got a mixture there of what might be people's inner palms, shall we say. So, what the author says is those people that have got softer and finer skin on their hands tend to have a greater physical and emotional sensitivity, and they are very sensitive to their home environments. Generally, they're very aware of their own needs for affection and tenderness, as well as those of their partner. So, they're not completely self absorbed. People with a coarse skin type tend to literally have a thicker skin, and not be quite so emotional or reactive. They're less affected by what happens in their environment. On the other hand, they may need to be encouraged to be more receptive, um, to be able to accept and embrace displays of affection from their loved one, and to be prompted to be sensitive to the needs of their partner. Now, just a little tidbit here before we talk about the lines on the palms, which will be coming in the next videos. I have put a red line on the Alamy image on the right, just to basically draw it to your attention so that you can see. You might have to expand the image, but you will be able to see this kind of crisscrossing of lines where it creates little circles along these lines. This is called purling. I believe it's called purling, and it is said to signify a potential for neurosis. Not everybody, of course, has this type of line on their hand. But when we start talking about the lines, we will be looking at all of these kind of things and the implications of what the lines on the hand mean. So, as expected, when I started looking at the palm content, um, this video's got very long, so I'm going to try and whip through a channel update for you and bring to your attention what's going on. Just a reminder that the colour content is now completed. If you're interested in that, you can go and visit the playlist and it'll be there. But for now, what we still have, and we're almost completed with the angel content as well. I'm not sure what I'm going to do after this, but in the meantime, we still have angel videos being published on a regular basis. Last week, you will have seen the content or the video for Hadraniel go up, who is the angel of love. Now, of course, when we talk about love within the context of her role, we're not talking about romantic love. That is an angel called Soket Hosey, if I can pronounce his name properly. This is Hadraniel, and this is about bringing love to your current relationships. It could be your family, it could be the people that you work with, heightening the vibration of those connections that you make with other people. The Angel Nisroc video was also published last week, and where he's the angel of freedom, it's about removing self imposed limitation a lot of the time. I mean, you can draw on the energy as far as removing obstacles and barriers from your path. There's actually a lot of things that we can do with that. I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'll bring that up another day. We'll look at other things we can do as far as creating freedom of expression and free will. um, I'll just waffle on if I talk about this too much. But either way, that video's up. You're encouraged to go and look at it. I found the content very useful back in the day, and I still do. This week, you're going to get access to the video on the Shekinah, the Angel of Unity. And when we talk about that, her role and task is to help unite the mind, body, and spirit aspects so that you can actually live and walk your path. Now, quite often, you will see content online by different spiritual people saying, you're, God, what do they say? They say things like, you are more than your body, which is true. We are a spirit. They will also say there is no separation between spirit and I am a spirit having an earthly experience, something like that. I can't remember, which is actually quite true. But the point is that when we're walking this earthly path, we have earthly needs, and it can be a real struggle to actually maintain that connection between the higher and the lower selves. So you can get information on this video that's due to be published next week. You're also going to get access to the video that I've created for Metatron, the Angel of Thought. Now, straight away, if people are into angels, I know they're going to turn around and go, like, what? Metatron's the Angel of Thought? Because he actually has many tasks, many roles, but within the context of the videos that I'm delivering, I think I do make reference. I can't remember now because I made this video a while ago. I do think that I made reference to the fact that he is actually the holder of the Akashic records, as I recall, which is the library, anyway, you'll find out about that if you go and watch the video. But not only that, he's also associated with sacred geometry. And that's an entire very complex subject in itself. But within the context of the content that I'm lining up for you, his role here for us is to help us purify our thoughts and to hold the divine thought, the divine idea. So, that bearing in mind, I think you're able to access that one on Thursday or Friday. I can't remember right now. But you will, if you want to watch these things and not miss them, just click the button to get notified. Well, I do apologise. There's not much to add in regard to the work that I've been doing on the Reiki manuals because, to be quite honest, I dropped my bundle really. I don't know why. I can't explain why right now, but I have allowed myself to be distracted and focused on other things. So my aim is to get back to the Reiki content over the next week. And I've got a couple of creative ideas that I want to bring to the table as well, but we'll see what happens. I'm not going to make any announcements of what I may or may not do because I don't want to let people down, but I've got a few ideas buzzing through my head. Just a reminder, though, or announcement, if people are new to the channel, they might not be aware unless they go and look at my channel, that I have content up. I've got a couple of different playlists, and they include things like self-help, which is evidence-based because, of course, I am a qualified social worker with experience working in the mental health field. So I've drawn upon some of the evidence-based stuff that meets social conformity, if you like. I also have self-help stuff in regard to chakras and some of the spiritual aspects, such as how to clear your aura, how to do the sacred breath, stuff like that. Then I've got content on color messages, the psychology of color, if you like, and the metaphysical properties of color. And I've also got the numerology playlist, which that's pretty well completed now, except for the fact that I haven't actually included the content on how people can establish their karmic paths from their birth numbers. It's important to have your birth time with that. And for now, nobody's asked about it anyway, but I'm not going to put it up until I actually feel that there's a need, because I think that if we're talking about privacy and confidentiality, it's the karmic path that actually is really deeply personal and revealing. Now, there is another playlist that I've got up, and that's the universal laws. And that's just something that I put up, and where we unpack, the aim was to unpack and have a discussion about it. Once again, I invite you to put comments up on anything and your experiences, including this palmology stuff, anything to do with the hands. And if you've got questions between now and next week, I'll make sure that I take a look and see if I can find answers for you. For now, though, my friends, I just want to say thank you very much for being part of my journey. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for being you. Until next week, I'm going to say goodbye for now. But before I do, just a reminder, if you like the content and you want to see more of it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Click like if you like it. I mean, that would always help anyway. But anyway, back to it. I will love you, leave you, catch you on the next video. Take care. Have a blessed day, blessed week. Bye bye for now.